In this last part today, I want to look at some of the class dynamics that are happening between the Unitarians and the Universalists in this time period, and also look at some of the racial dynamics that are happening during this time. I'm going to start with the class dynamics. So, as I said before, John Murray, he was a Methodist preacher. He was educated in Europe, but when he's coming to America because he's lost everything. His family, his income. He just got out of debtor's prison through luck of a sibling taking pity on him. And Hosea Ballou is one of so many kids in a farm that is self-educated. This is not an affluent man from childhood. Whereas Channing and Parker are Boston elite. And none of these folks would be talking to each other. Unitarians were not going to be talking to the Universalist leaders and vice versa, even if they had similar beliefs and values, because of a class divide. There's very much social structures like that are very much alive and well in the US. And that's also going to determine where churches are and who's working together with one another. And on the Unitarian side, with racial dynamics at this time period, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between anti-slavery movements at this time. This were early 1800s. Civil War hasn't happened yet. And abolitionist mindsets at the time. So anti-slavery was the idea that slavery is wrong and that we should end it. But we don't want to upset the system too much too fast, and we should take our time and move incrementally. An abolitionist movement was saying, these are human beings that are enslaved. It has to end now. And this will eventually culminate in the Civil War, or not culminate, but lead in part to the Civil War. And I want to just make sure that I'll stick with just Channing for this purpose. Most of his career, he was anti-slavery. And once he shifted to abolitionist, he lost his church. They kicked him out. Our early roots do not, we often paint a prettier picture of early Unitarians, and they're also creatures, men of their time, in these cases, men. And it's amazing to me, and maybe it shouldn't be, that one of the nation's greatest preachers at the time, who could take a third of congregational churches with him, the moment he shifts from anti-slavery to abolitionist, he's out. And I think about these roots today in our current lives. Anti-slavery sounds, when you hear in today, when you hear like the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement, some folks were saying that's too in your face. Or what we're dealing right now with the defund the police. Again, it seems like it's, for some folks, it's too fast, too soon, etc. And it's 200 years later, and we're recycling the same dynamics we had in 1820 as we're having now in 2020. And it's a matter of how fast is okay. How much can the system take at once? And who gets to decide what's too fast or too slow? And I mention this not that I have an answer. I mention it that it's when we're doing the cycle of roots to leaves, where do we come from and where are we now and where are we going? I think history is important to remember that we've done this before and we're doing it again now. And to think through, like, when we hear these stories from 1820s and we have a feeling about it removed in time from 200 years, do we have the same feeling about the same sort of dynamics going on now? And as I mentioned before, the Universalists, we're pushing out into indigenous land. And what's okay? What's too fast? What's too slow? And I think about that even, today, we're still repeating these same things with the pipelines on land that's not ours, not the state's land. And what is okay to let happen and what's not okay to let happen, even amidst a culture where we have certain values that we agree with now, in progressive circles of UU, we still have these stories happening around us. And it's almost as if mainstream society has not really learned from where we come from. So for those here now, or for those that are watching it later, you can reflect on this with each other if you're watching it later. But for those here now, do you find the early disparity between Unitarians and Universalists along class lines to still be evident today? All right, so I think we've come to an end here for this one. Thank you all for being here.